Hey, it's Karina Reichman, and you are listening to Comes a Time with Oteil Burbridge and Mike Fenoya. If you're digging the podcast, do these guys a favor and review and subscribe. It means a lot. Be sure to follow the pod on social media, YouTube, and if you're joining for bonus episodes and exclusive content, go to patreon.com/comesatimepod and get on the bus. And now, here's Mike and Oteil.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Comes the Time. That is Mike.
And that is Oteil. What's up, buddy?
Man, I'm feeling good. Today, we got a good one for you guys. This one is just all about the magic for me. You guys know that I got really heavy into professional wrestling. And right when I just went down the Iron Sheik rabbit hole, soon after that, we had the good fortune to be able to go to WWE SmackDown in Miami. And on the same row as me is this guy wearing an Iron Sheik t-shirt. And he saw my Sheik t-shirt, and we were like, yeah, the Sheik, blah, blah, blah. And then turns out he's the Iron Sheik's manager. I was like, no way, because the Iron Sheik had liked a couple of my posts, my wrestling posts that we had done, like the Halloween Havoc one. Yeah. And so I'm just losing it, and he's losing it because he's a huge deadhead. Had seen Dead and Company like a bunch of times, and we're both just like, is this too much? And I said something about it being magic. He's like, bro, I believe in the magic. My whole life is magic. And it truly is. He has the most incredible story. His dad and the Iron Sheik were friends in Iran, and he's Iranian. They're Iranian Jews, not the Iron Sheik, but Paige Magen's family. And so I was like, wow, that's just an interesting story in and of itself. And they had to leave the country because of regime changes, came here. And so he ended up being the Iron Sheik's manager. And it also has an entertainment company called Magen Boys, which is really insane. They who was based in Miami, and they sent some dancers and a DJ to my son's party and completely lit it on fire. Like this dude was dancing. It's like a stunt dancer. He was bouncing on his head, and then he lifted his hands up. So he's doing moves, balancing just on his head, no hands. Like crazy stuff. I think his name was Showtime or something. But like, it was the best party my kids ever had. So he's just like brought so much joy into my life. And, it's a great story and a great chat. So you guys will really enjoy it. And thanks for all the education on wrestling, Mike.
No sweat, buddy. I feel I have to say you're welcome / I'm sorry, because I feel like I gave you your first pack of cigarettes. But I'm so happy to see you loving wrestling like I did when I was a child. So it's beautiful. It's adorable. Did you tell anybody?
You can apologize to my wife. She's the one that's having a hard time.
Where the hell was I? Columbus, Ohio, Oteil? You were on Dead Tour. Ohio. Oteil's on Dead Tour. I'm at Columbus, Ohio doing stand-up with the Impractical Jokers, and I'm walking around during the day. We always like to hit little shops and stuff. I can't remember the name of the shop, but I FaceTime you, and you're in the gym, I think, right? And I lost you. We're in the gym, and I go, dude, you got to see this. And this toy store had literally, and I mean, you name it. God, I got to remember the name. Maybe we'll put it in the notes. I have to look it up. Columbus, Ohio toy store. And man, there it is. They had bins and rows. And dude, I put you on FaceTime, and the whole store is like, you go, what? No shit. Dude, show me around. Do they have Macho Man? And I got you those, yeah.
Did they have Dusty Rhodes?
Dusty Rhodes.
For those of you that can't see, I'm holding up my action figures: a Cactus Jack, Mick Foley,
that's right,
a Dusty Rhodes, and then Mike. Oh my God, was the magic not in full effect? He goes, "Oh, they have a Macho Man. Oh, look, it's a talking Macho Man. So we replaced the battery. It's so awesome. I think Kabi had it. I don't know where is it. Oh man.
I'm so glad
good
that works,
stuff.
dude. I am so glad that works. And
Yeah.
I have to tell you, dude, you gave everybody in that store a good laugh too. They were so happy for you via FaceTime. Oh my God, it was great. The owners of the store were
Well,
like,
yeah,
this is why we have this store. This, like literally like make people happy.
This is why we do it.
This is why we do it.
So for all you deadhead / wrestling head fans, this is the one for you.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And thanks for listening, everybody. And thank you, Paige, for being so awesome and joining us. And folks, if you're having a good time, subscribe, share, review, join us on Patreon /Comes the Time Pod for a bonus episode each week. And be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel because we got a bunch of great stuff coming. So thank you, Paige. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you soon. Later.
Paige, Magen, what's up, brother? So good to see you.
This is a honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much. How are you guys?
Wow. I mean, easily the most handsome man ever to grace our podcast. Look at that. Oh my God, that beard.
You know,
so distinguished.
I used to color. I was so nervous about seeing gray, and now I'm just letting it all hang out. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's a nice
dude,
beard.
After Jeff Commenti, I'm like, I wish my hair would just go silver all the way, because that would be so cool. So it's a gift to be able to do that.
Well, it takes a minute when you see like yourself, like when you were all black, and then when you see yourself gray, you're like, I feel like I literally thought I looked like Ernie from Ernie and Bert, like literally. Now I'm like going for that Clooney look.
So weird too, because like mine grew in super thick and full and rich when it was almost reddish. It was like a reddish brown. Now it grows in 5 different colors. It's like gray, white, reddish brown, black. And from a distance, it looks all spotty and patchy. It's like I just shouldn't even be growing anything.
It's like a junkyard at that point.
It does. It really
coming out of it.
Yeah, it looks like a fire took place a week ago on my face. But it's great to see you.
It's probably hard on the way to silver because you got that in between part, like Mike's talking about, where it's just all like. Yep. But then if you're lucky enough to get there, like my dad, But man, we got to tell people how we met because it's the craziest story. I would shout out to Andrew Levine, who was riding bikes with us, and I didn't know that he worked for WWE. And so when I got into it, they were like, Andrew works for them. I was like, no, really? So I texted him. And then, of course, he put us front row, like floor 1, row 1. There's the SmackDown in Miami.
Well, like,
and
can I roll this out because there's like detail that you don't know?
Oh, excellent! Please.
So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. So how did we meet? So I mean, I knew of you. I'm a fan of the band. I mean, I've seen the Dead a few times in the '90s. Like all things considered. But a friend of mine, Adam Lipowitz, who's a big fan. His uncle's Lorne Michaels from SNL. About 3 months ago, 3 months prior to that December. So like in November, he sends me a picture of you, your wife, and your son on Halloween. He's like, "Do you know this dude?" I'm like, "How do I know him?" He's like, "He's the bassist in the Dead." I'm like, "Oh my God, he's a fan. He's a wrestling guy." And again, like it's like that thing with Eric, like either the green light turns on or off. So if you like wrestling and I like wrestling, I don't care if you're 8 or 80, we're best friends. Like
that's comedy too, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a click. And I mean, side note, I once got a speeding ticket, and it was on my phone driving, which is like a huge fine in Canada. And the judge recognized me from my Iron Sheik movie and dismissed my case and asked everyone to leave and held me back to tell me, true story, that he wears wrestling underwear underneath his cloak sometimes. That's how much of a fan he is. Okay, so it really does show if you are a wrestling fan, the barrier is like I don't care if you're the king of the world or you're a 4-year-old. Anyway, just painting that picture. So I felt connected to that one picture that Oteil, his wife, and his son had on Halloween.
Kavi was Bianca Belair.
Okay, fine. So WWE is coming to Miami. I'm taking my family to Miami for a family vacation. And I actually ended up becoming friends with a guy who was working for FTX. FTX is the crypto company. And he ended up saying, I got you a box, I got you this, I got you that. And ironically, December 1, FTX, did you see that guy, Sam Bankman-Fried? Like the whole thing exploded.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not going to ask him for those tickets again. I'm not going to be like, bro, like, I don't know. And I just felt like, let me work on this on my own.
Like, Sam, you get one phone call. He's like, I better call Paige about the tickets.
Like, can you imagine like $1 billion business imploding, and then there's a guy being like, you know those tickets you offered?
Hey, is it cool if I bring my friend?
So long story short, so I reached out to WWE and I said I needed some tickets for my family and my son's friends and blah blah blah. My brother, okay, this is where you don't know the story. My brother doesn't have the tickets. I was given 8 tickets from the WWE, not knowing where I'm sitting. I go, Gian, just get your seats. Because I know when they give you tickets, they don't give you like anything special. They just give you like, 15th row, middle, by the ramp, whatever. It's not like a big deal. It's like family and friends tickets. Didn't know where I was sitting. My brother buys cheap seats on StubHub. Boom, gets in. We get in. And I get my seats at will call, and they're second row seats. Second row seats, ringside. My brother's like, you piece of shit. Like, how dare you? You better hook me up. Now, this is where the 40-year-old virgin fan thing kicks in. My brother sees me. He's up there, and he sees me walking to my seats. I'm not telling him that I'm sitting second row. My brother, my twin brother, is such a loser that while he was in the building with tickets in the building, bought 4 ringside seats that were right in front of me just to fuck with me.
Amazing.
Okay, like, you don't know a fan or a more person that would buy seats in a show while they're in the show.
That's amazing.
Okay? Just to mess with you.
I like your brother.
But so anyway, so I'm at the concession booth, and Oteil, who I'm not clicking on, not realizing yet, there's a guy wearing an Iron Sheik shirt, wearing that shirt. In a perfect world, if I saw someone at a grocery store or at a mall, like, I would probably call it out. But the idea of it being more regular at a wrestling show, I didn't make it a thing.
Sure.
So I end up buttering my brother up, and we all take turns between the second row and the first row, going back and forth. And so when I'm sitting at the front, I'm sitting in the front row, literally right in front of the seat that I had right behind me. There's me. There's my son's friend, who's like a 10-year-old kid, Oteil's son, Oteil's wife, and Oteil. Like, literally, we're sitting beside each other. But like 17 minutes before, I saw the guy, you're grabbing a popcorn or whatever it was. And so I just like scratch my head. I'm like, okay, is there irony there? Is there irony there? And then as I'm like staring, I think we looked at each other for a minute, but he didn't recognize he didn't know who I was. I just, my brain just started squinting, and it just started like working. Like, I was like, how do I know that guy? And then my brother's brother-in-law was like, I think that's Oteil. And I'm like, oh, it is Oteil. So I look at him, I go,
and I saw your face when it first did that.
Yeah, and you're like, you did this. And again, I'm sure you don't get marked out in an environment like that, right? So I look over and I'm like, are you Oteil? I'm like, are you Oteil? And he goes like, yeah. Like the mob was gonna come, and like, just, we're like at a Beatles concert. It's Oteil. And I go, my heart jumped. I'm like, dude, I'm the Iron Sheik. I'm the Iron Sheik. He's like, what do you mean you're like I'm the guy who was with the Iron Sheik. I go, and anyways, it was a quick, magnetic, thunderous, electric, like super bro moment.
Yeah.
And we just started talking and jabbing hard, like as if we've known each other for more than 14 seconds. And then Killer Cross, who's a wrestler, ended up texting me. So I then bring Oteil with me and all these kids. We go backstage to get some pictures. And it was just like a full zap to the heart moment for real.
Yeah.
And I could say this, and I don't want to sound like too mushy, but like I've spoken to Oteil more than I've spoken to people in the past 20 years. Like since then. Like even though it's text, whatever, we speak enough for me to be like it's a comfortable conversation. It's not. It's been a very unique 6 months, I can say.
That's incredible.
It was the quickest bromance. I've only had one quicker, and that was my best friend Eddie Castillo. This was when I was 19, and we literally met, and then we just hung out every day from right after that. But it was so great because how I remember it as I didn't have my action figure yet, but I had gotten my T-shirt, and I was so bummed that my action figure hadn't come out. So I was psyched to wear my Chic T-shirt. And then when I first saw you, or you first saw me, it was the T-shirt. I thought I remember you going, the Chic, and I was like, yeah. And then you had this T-shirt on. I had the other one on. I was like, ooh, I want that.
I was rocking.
And then all of a sudden, you were rocking this one, and I had the other one. That's the white one.
Oh, hold on.
It's a different one.
Let me fact check that.
And then all of a sudden, all the kids. There was I remember, was there like 6 kids or 4 kids?
There was a lot of children.
Looking at me like, you know how like meerkats or prairie dogs all look up when they see like a prey.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's after him, and I was like, uh-oh, they're all staring at me. I was like, Jess, what's going on? He's like, are you Oteil? And I was like, yeah.
Well, no, sorry.
I'm the Sheik. I was like, what are the odds? No way.
Let me add this moment. So I took a super dad moment where we were at the hotel, and my son's friends and my friends' kids were all together. And I'm like, all right, you're all coming with me. They're like, well, are there any other parents coming? And I'm like, no, I got them. So I took 6 other kids with me solo.
All the kids.
Like I couldn't care. They're like, well, are you sure you need help? I'm like, I got this. I'm like, I have no problem. I got an Uber and bam and boom. But the crazy part is that the kid who was sitting beside me, his father is a humongous dead guy, like a humongous dead guy. Yeah. And so he heard of you, knew of you. And then his father, when we sent him the pictures, he goes, isn't it ironic that the greatest day of my life had to do with my son getting It's like he's never going to experience what his son did that he fell onto. So it was like it was just magical because again, kids now are rocking like it's almost like fashion code wearing dead shit, right?
Oh God, yeah.
Like I see
more than ever.
Yeah, and that's what
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying that's what tripped me up because I was sitting there with Jess and I was like, the kids recognize me. Because like the kids were like, you know, I was like, what's going on? But it must have been that one kid that was just like, it was such a great moment. And I was just like, honey, my wife, she believes in the magic at this point.
Yeah.
And I was like, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, what are the odds, man? Like, and what a great night of wrestling too.
Yeah, for
Nigel
sure.
was the pictures and video of Nigel and how into it he was. I was just like, even my wife is not into it. She was like, that was special. Like watching them.
That was your first live wrestling event too, right?
Dude, yeah. Well, we had done a local one.
Yeah, but that was your first like big.
Locally.
That was like your first big thing.
That was SmackDown
in your life. Big in your life.
Oh, he just got into it, dude. Like we were talking about. I told him about DDP yoga, and he was like, who's DDP? And I'm like, Diamond Dallas Page. I'm like, he was a wrestler. And then Oteil literally tied weights to his ankles and dove to the very bottom of wrestling and was like, just slowly made his way back up to the surface and was like, dude, this shit's deep. This is some, and it was like, I was so happy to watch him 12-year-old geek out because it's reminded me of how I was when I grew up with all this, you know. It just
what it sounds like. It's like, you know, it's like someone's like, I just spoke to a guy a couple days ago. I'm like, I want to look at a new show. He's like, well, have you seen this? I'm like, yeah. Have you seen this? Yeah. He's like, and then they were talking. I'm like, they're like, oh man, did you see the latest episode of Billions? I'm like, what's Billions?
Yeah.
They're like, oh my God,
you haven't seen Billions?
I go, I'm jealous that you have all this to catch up on. And so like, as a wrestling fan, when you're like just learning in the learning tree, I think there's a comparable with music. It's like I'm such a super fan that I know this guy in Germany or this guy in Brooklyn and this guy. Maybe for you, it's like, you know, this coming up bassist or this coming up person, and you know that his backstory and how he got there. Like, there's so much of that, especially also in comedy, Mike.
Yeah,
Comedy
of course.
is the exact parallel to the indie wrestling to the big leagues conversation.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yes, 100%.
Too.
Well, and also it's cool for me to see Oteil experiencing all of this at the age that he's at and at all the experience that he's had, because I wonder, you know, I got to geek out like this with wrestling, with the Grateful Dead, with Fish, with comedy. So many times I've been able to, like, you know, belly flop into a subculture, you know, but Oteil has been the subculture that a lot of us has belly flopped into. Do you know what I mean? So like, we're geeking out about the music. You haven't even really had a chance to like geek out hard about things, and watching him, it's like watching somebody hear their first Fish tape back in high school, or going to their first Dead show. So it's fun to see him get like, look at the action figures I got, look at the new t-shirts I got. It's like I'm talking to my buddies in high school again about, like, you know, getting Fish tickets and stuff. So it's very, very exciting to see.
But let's talk about that for a second, because like that, let's just call it that sugary feeling that you get, right?
Hell yeah. Yep.
That, and again, you are a performer, you're in front of 100 people or 80,000, or, you know, same with you, Mike. Like the sugar, the dopamine, the youthful, the fountain of youth that we drink, being in entertainment and being able to consider it work or consider it a job, but then also be able to, like, I don't know, feel connected about it. I mean, you know, no offense to the chiropractor, I'm not dissing him, but like, I don't think that guy, like when I drop my kids off at school and I'm wearing like my Jordans and a pair of jeans and a hat, it's like, I'm not having this like, have a good day, Billy, we'll see you later. It's like, it's a different mindset because of what we've been exposed to. That you can't share. It's like a comic is friends with comics. Musician is friends with musicians. Wrestlers are friends with wrestlers.
Yeah.
So, but the parallels here, they're all kind of like their own fandom and their own, I don't know, relationship with the love of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're like cults, you know. And I actually heard Mick Foley, because I've always said, you know, they're like carnies, and that's why I relate to them, because I feel like musicians are like carnies. And I was watching a Mick Foley, I watched his podcast, and he speaks carny, and he spoke a little bit of it, and I was like, that's why I love this guy, because I'm seeing the parallel, but he can go all the way back and make that connection. Like, it's an unbroken line. And I've learned so much history from Mick Foley too, and he's been a lot of the source of me like getting into New Japan wrestling and all the Japanese stuff. It's just like a rabbit hole.
No, but what you said about like about the language, I was watching a match a couple of days ago. I knew one of the guys knew it was like an international match. It was like two Americans and maybe like a Japanese guy. But like the fact that they're dancing in the ring and know what to do and what to say, without even speaking the same language, right? It's almost like sitting on a band and like when they're doing this, you know what this means. I remember I was on tour with James Brown when I was like 22. I actually was working with a couple of the members of his band, and I remember that when I was on the side of the stage, he would just do things that just were like, you knew what they were, but no one else could call it or see it, right? It's kind of like that with wrestling, like hearing them speak in Carney. It's like a rite of passage for you to understand what they're saying.
You said something before
lesson.
You said something before we jumped on air here, Paige, about, you know, whether you're 8 or 80, I connect with you if you're a wrestling guy or if you're a collector or whatever. And it's so interesting that we're talking about this, because it's like comedians always talk about the fact that if I travel to a city, I'm going to Wisconsin this weekend, I'm going to meet a comic that's opening for me for the first time. I'm going to have a connection with him immediately that me and my oldest best friend that doesn't do stand-up will never have. there's that thing where we have that immediate, like, you get it, you understand the grind, like you've committed, you're addicted, you've done, you got the dope in your veins, and
Well, no, like it's like you've turned, like in Homeland when you
exactly like a vampire.
Yeah, exactly.
You've turned.
Yeah, it's so interesting because
So-
it is that it's wild to have that connection with someone you've never met before.
Oh yeah, comedy, music, wrestling, and about who they were when you knew them and who they are now. Energy. Like I was with my friend Tony Hinchcliffe on Friday. He did 2 nights in Toronto. He sold out 1,500 seats per 6 o'clock and a 9 o'clock.
Nice.
But when I met him, it was 15 years ago, and he was working the door at the Comedy Store.
Yeah, man.
I remember how I was with him then. I would bring the Sheik, and he was my first point of contact. And he was like, "Oh my God, it's the Sheik," and we were like clicking. And I couldn't walk up to Pauly Shore or Jeff Ross the same way. I was also, someone that was on the come up. And so when we share that, right, when you share the come up, right, those are like battle wounds. You could say that about music, you can say that about wrestling, you can say that about comedy. But what's more unique is like when you hold on to the currency of a relationship, which I'm obsessed with. Like I say this to everyone. If I meet you once, it's not worth $1 million to never speak to you again. I value the human connection, right? There are times where like, oh my, like in 2002, I was booking wrestlers for $50 that are now worth 50 grand a night, right? So I remember how I treated them, and now who are they now, right? And I'm sure both have scenarios where like I started out with Amy Schumer or Oteil, you started out with this guy. Now who are they? Well, what does that mean to your relationship with them as we both progress in life?
That's very true. It's super interesting too to think about, because it's like there's this, like, especially now I feel with the internet and social media and all that, like there are meteoric rises. There are folks who deserve a meteoric rise, but maybe don't get it. And then there's the slow and steady wins the race kind of rise. And then there's, all of it all at once. And when you have folks that you can look at and notice along the way, Big J Okerson was like a mentor to me when I first started out. And he's, always been on a steady, rise, and with his radio show and podcasts and live shows and all that. And it's just watching him and the way, like talking with him afterwards and like sharing, stories of, he would help me when I went through things where I was banging my head against the wall, and he's like, it's going to pass. Like, you're going to be okay. Like, I went through this, and it's so nice to have that. God, it's so nice to have that,
But is there such thing as an overnight success? Like, really, unless it's just in the fractional anomaly of numbers, right?
Yeah. Sometimes there is some people, like I've noticed, it's been a theme on our podcast recently, because we've been having these people on that were so young when got really famous, like Derek Trucks. I met him when he was 11, and he was playing like a 40-year-old. And, I think he joined the Allman Brothers when he was 15 or 16, something like that. And then Jerry Jamont, like all these people. But a lot of times what you see is people that make it real big. If they make it too quick, they don't really know the value of it. Like maybe they have a lot of talent, but it's rare to see them last, like a Stevie Wonder and a Michael Jackson that were literally kids.
Right.
Like I think I saw yesterday, Stevie Wonder wrote My Sharia Moore when he was like 9 or something insane. Some tune we all know he wrote as a kid.
Yeah. Insane.
But that longevity, you see him crash and burn early, but sometimes it's just like these kids like Anakin Skywalker that have more midichlorians than others. But I'm glad I made it late, because I'd have been dead if I had made it in my 20s.
Amen to that. I would have too.
And I'm still not so famous that I can't like go to the store.
No, but your culture and that's interesting, because the Sheik, when the Sheik passed away, he was 83 years old. But he only started getting into shit when he was 40, 41, 42. Up until 40, 41, 42, he was an Olympic athlete. He was like biting tomatoes, like as if they were apples. Like he was doing 500 squats a day. His body was like that temple of temples. While these other wrestlers, from the time they were probably 18, 19, 20, substance was just a part of their lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for the amount of time he got to be on the planet, because everyone around him, sadly, was exposed to all that, culture and normalcy to them. And it, obviously you've seen it firsthand, comedy and music. It bites you hard, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting too, because like, that I'm thinking about that meteoric rise thing, and I think meteoric rise is sometimes in the eyes of the beholder, because like I would say, right, like Billy Strings is having like a meteoric, like a, overnight, but
but
I
he's
wouldn't say he's an
older,
overnight
so
sensation. See, like,
yeah.
like that's the thing. Like people go, "Oh, I've never heard of you. Like, how long have you been doing this?" And then you realize, oh shit, the backstory is like way
Been around a
longer.
while.
Yeah, you've been around a while, and there's a lot of like, there's a lot of success and failure. That's the shit I love.
Well, do
You
you
know
know
what
that
I mean?
meme?
Yeah.
Do you know that meme of a guy leaning over with the girl at the football game and he's trying to explain to her about something? You ever see that meme?
I don't
There's,
think so.
there's a meme of a guy like looking at a girl who looks so disinterested, and then like the meme is like, so like Hulk Hogan beat the Iron Sheik in '84, and she's like, what the fuck? Like, you can't speak to too many people about what you're talking about unless they're in the eco. And
Right.
that's where,
Yeah.
when I think about this conversation, like music, comedy, wrestling, like we're all potentially savants in our conversations about it, but we're also fans of the other pieces of the triangle.
Totally.
My favorite is
It's
the
unbelievable.
overlap between Grateful Dead and Allman Brothers too, and professional wrestling. Because when I started doing my wrestling posts, and I think the Halloween Havoc might have been my first one. I have to go back through my thread and look. But when I started doing my professional wrestling posts, man, the deadheads they're like, what? No way, Oteil's in and the ones that really are excited because I'm into the 80s wrestling, like, oh, he's an old head. Like, yeah. It's so funny, man.
Well, this is the whole thing about like cross-pollination with audiences right now. Like a friend of mine is working with, Jelly Roll? Do you know that guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, my buddy Roosevelt
Josh?
Collier that plays Sacred Steel, that plays with Jelly Roll.
So my friend Jared is working with Jelly Roll, and what he identified, we were talking last week, was like, you've got this guy that there's, you don't put a rapper in a song today. You put a rapper in a country star, because it's almost like putting like the red and blue liquids together to get we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But like that scientific explosion and those data points allow for new people to become, ancestrally connected, right?
Yeah. Yep. It's very interesting. I heard something about how country and hip hop are very similar, that like groups of people collaborate on songs. You know what I mean? Like I didn't realize, but like there's like 7 or 8 country singers that contribute to maybe one song or 2 songs.
Like they're writing they're sitting and writing on some of those lyrics.
Yeah, or they're submitting pieces and things like that, and it's all kind of collective for each other. That's a very unique. And so, and in hip hop, it's kind of similar as well. Like there are artists that just do their, just them, they write their stuff, whatever. Yes. But it's not uncommon that to have like collaborations like that, which I think open up those 2 worlds in particular to jive. Is
it more uncommon to be a sole writer on a track today?
Uncommon.
I think it's probably 50-50. I hear about hip hop tracks.
Like I have a friend that works for Lady Gaga, and he like is one of 11. Like he literally wrote like 6 lines of a 40-line song.
Right.
When you look at the credits, I don't know about you guys, but like I like looking at IMDb's credits and like movie credits, music credits at the back of the CD. I love, and then I'll be like there's a sound. There's like this like yacht rocky sound of like almost like Ambrosia, Michael McDonald stuff, and I'm like, and like Prince, and I'm like, oh my god, that guy was in everyone's ear.
Yeah.
Like, who is that guy?
Yeah.
What's his influence? Where did he come from?
Yeah, I love that.
But I find myself doing it more with stuff like wrestling, or UFOs than I do music. I mean, I've been playing music since I was 5, and my dad was very much a historian of it. So I've, I don't know. It's like I do it more in other things than music, but I definitely do it in music. It's like a history lesson. If I'm into Jocko, then I got to see who his heroes were. Then I got to see who their heroes were, and then you're back to the 20s relatively quickly.
Is it like the kid that worked at McDonald's, after he worked there he stopped eating McDonald's? Is there like that type of mindset?
No, I think there was more. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Or like
But
even
I
for
think
Mike,
more of it
is it hard for Mike to is it hard to make Mike laugh? Right? That I'll tell you, the first moment in comedy that I was upset about something I didn't know was about to happen. I did a gig with Bob Saget in Montreal. It was a corporate event.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
And the guy that was with me was the former founder of Just for Laughs.
Okay.
And we were talking, and they were talking about Don Rickles. My heart, I was like so proud to be in this conversation. And I go, so like, what shows do you go to? What do you like? And I'm like trying to like be like, have you been to this? He's like, I just don't. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, it's just not funny. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, what do you mean? He's like, I don't need to be at a show to know if someone's good or not. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I can tell by the beats and the rhythm of the laughs to know if someone's crushing or bombing. Okay. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, we did a show in like the 90s with Joan Rivers. And I was in my office, didn't want to see the show. I was just working while I knew she was on stage in one of those theaters. And he said, I knew she was bombing about 5 to 10 minutes in because I didn't hear the beats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then I went down and I knew that it was frustrating, and that she walked off at 43 minutes when she was supposed to do 60. And he said, when you get to that point, funny isn't funny anymore. And I'm now, when I'm seeing comics, I'm like looking at them the same way maybe you're looking at a musician, or the same way you're looking at somebody. I'm turning a little bit, and it makes me nervous that I can't appreciate just funny.
Well, I think it's this. You just have once you've had the really good stuff,
Well,
it's just more rare when the good stuff comes down the line,
Yeah, and I'm sure, Oteil, you had moments where you said you went to see Earth, Wind, and Fire and you were in tears.
Dude.
So I have my Earth, Wind, and Fires with stand up that, like, when I got to go back to remembering like why I got into this in the first, why I liked when the business just shits all over. Not even the bit. You just have the notion that you're not, you're stuck in the mud. Every now and then I got to go back and listen to like my old favorites and kind of just go like, oh yeah, all right, that's right, And I mean, I see it, I'm around it nightly. It does get to the point where it's just kind of noise, like you can't sit and like have focus on everybody's jokes and also because I maybe selfishly don't want to become influenced by what someone's talking about.
Well, how easy is that? How easy?
So easy.
Because is there like a tint of like, you're taking my shit?
Well, so there's, we all talk about parallel thought in comedy where it's like, okay, if your parents were divorced and my parents were divorced, you're going to do a joke about it because that's your life, and I'm going to do a joke about it because that's my life. And that's parallel thought. We're not, but if there's a joke where it's literally like kind of, public domain, I don't know, peeing in the tub kind of thing or whatever, like it just turns into kind of like, all right, it's been done, you know what I mean, or whatever. But I just feel like I don't want my cadence or my writing or my tags or anything to like be influenced by anyone, because that's like, just as I've gotten older in comedy, I feel like I'm finally getting a grasp on what that even is. You know what I mean?
You feel like you have to are you like earmuffs level?
No, I just don't pay attention. I tune it out. You know what I mean? Like I go watch the people I'm interested in. I mean, I'm surrounded by phenomenally talented savants, like you mentioned, like all the time. And I watch them to purely enjoy them. But then if I feel myself kind of like, oh, that's a great concept, I'm like, I got to walk away. Like, I don't want to, because it'll get stuck on the inside of my brain and then I can't get it out. You know what I mean? So I like to just I'm going to walk out of the room now and, but if Attell's on or if, any of my favorites, like I'm down there just giggling like a child.
Every time I see a tell, I'm like, did he say that before? Is that freestyle?
He's
Because he can talk without thinking, and I can do the same. I can talk without thinking better than most people I know. Like I have a skill because I've been on the mic and I host events and I can just be on my feet and I'm very comfortable in that chaotic sense. But I'm always curious if he's rinse and repeating, which is okay because it's your bit and you got your shit. But when I see him like doing like the bumping mics or like when he's just coming in and popping in at a 12 o'clock where there's no one around, I think I've seen the most sharply witted sniper in the game.
He's a comet. He's a shooting star. He's different than everybody, and he's everyone's favorite, and it's well deserved. And he's a very sweet, kind, giving person off stage, and everything he says on stage, like I hang on every word still. And I've traveled with him and opened for him a million times, and like I've said it before a million times on this podcast, like there's a handful of moments doing stand up that I was present enough to enjoy the moment. And one of them was opening for him at the Wilbur in Boston and seeing him laughing on stage, like on side stage. And I'm like, this is it. It could all end now. Like that was the biggest thing for me. But yeah, he's literally like an alchemist. Like he just pulls shit out of nowhere. And it's like, what
it's
the fuck?
Like it's new shit. It's not.
Oh, he's pure. He's grain alcohol. He's just like, it's down to
he's
the
so
purest
comfortable.
form.
He's so comfortable on stage. And
Really
that's why I
is.
think you can improvise.
That is the I guess, is that the mileage? Like, you know,
he makes references.
Experience. Yeah.
He pulls references out from like today, and he's way older than me. And he pulls references out of pop culture that I'm like, the fuck's he talking about? Like he's like pulling out names of like mumble rappers and shit as like a ref, or like a snap quick throwaway thing.
Yeah.
That makes like one pocket of the room explode. And they're like, fuck, you know what he's doing is it's like he's making forever fans. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like one by one, he's making forever fans. You know what I mean? And he's going like, I'm relating to you. I'm relating to you. I'm relating, but all in like this. It's brilliant. I don't know. He's just absolutely.
And it's like,
brilliant.
there's a thing about crowd work, which I don't necessarily say he's a direct crowd work guy, but he uses the crowd, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I always think
especially bumping mics too.
Well, bumping mics is a crowd play. So when I've seen Rickles a few times, I think I said this to Oteil once, like, you know, it's easy. He can see, there's an Asian guy, there's a black guy, there's a white guy, there's a Jewish guy. Like he could go bang, 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 bang. And I get after the third time, it's still funny.
Yeah.
But it's almost like it's a plant because it's very easy to just be racist.
Yeah.
No.
Like it's very easy to be like, oh, this guy, like,
right.
Whatever. You know, where's your wife? What are you feeding her? Like, whatever. Like, it's like, and so whatever he's saying, and I'm realizing that, but with Attell, it's the same thing, but it's so much 100 times layer of more impressive because it's not the same thing every time.
It's not, and it's like, and he goes on at the most like difficult. It's almost like he likes digging himself a hole to get out of sometimes. Like he'll go on at 2 a.m. at the Cellar. Everyone's hammered. The nights, people have just seen a lineup of phenomenal comedy. And he's like, all right, like I got my work cut out for me, and he's like outside smoking a cigarette, like you'd see like Tyson in the tunnel getting ready to and he just comes out and it's just like slam, slam, slam. And he talks to the host and he talks to the staff and he like makes it all this thing of kind of like, pay attention or you're going to get run over kind of, and but he does it in moments off stage too that are kind of amazing. Like Jay was telling me a story. Attell was showing Jay his new car and it had a sunroof, and Attell goes, check it out. And he opens the sunroof and he goes, that's so Jesus can hear my rhymes. It's just such a fucking stupid thing. But from Attell, it's like, just what a funny, he's dressed like a,
is he thinking about anything when he's smoking that butt?
I got everything and nothing. I don't know.
Is his hard drive empty and it wants to get full on stage? Or is he already full of a hard drive that's unloading the data? That's the question. When I'm nervous about doing a gig, I've built this immunity, and I don't know about you, Oteil. Like I don't think about it until I'm on the stage. Because if I was thinking about it until I was on the stage, I'd bite my fingers off and I'd cry myself to sleep, right?
Yeah.
So I've built this immunity. I might get tired all day and I'll just like bottle up my energy so that when I can go boom. But other
That's
than
me
that,
too.
I can't think about it.
I think it's baked into the cake with what I do.
Well, like how much of that with when you're performing is like what unknowns are you going into, or is it all laid out?
It's all like with the music, it's all like because it's improvisational, and everything I've done from, you know, the jazz tradition or the African music tradition or Colonel Bruce, Allman Brothers, Dead, it's all improvisational. So we know we're going and just shaking the dice and throwing them, so you get more comfortable with that. And that's what I
In the
love
chaos. Is that chaos?
about comedy and wrestling. Because like, when I watch the interviews with the wrestlers, they're talking, especially the older ones that are just calling it. Yeah, they're all the modern matches I feel are more choreographed or planned out. And some people did that in the old days, but just like Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair, they're just calling it in there. And so you're fishing around to see what makes the crowd pop. And you may have something planned or you think that's great and it pops, but not so much. And then something you just did on the fly just like made the crowd really pop. And so then
let's go there
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and
100%.
that hooked me so hard. I was like, dude, that's like improvising on stage. Cause at some points, for who knows why, it just all comes together and you feel it on stage and you feel it in the crowd and you just run with it,
But like when you're doing like a China cat into a thing, or when Mike's doing a joke about his parents that goes into a thing and then he comes back to the thing to bring you back to that thing. It's kind of the same thing with like the wrestler who's like working the leg or the arm, right?
Yes,
Totally. Or
exactly. Yeah.
or you're, and then in the wrestling sense too, it could be the guy that got hit by a chair from a manager that slid up and didn't see him coming, right? And now he's got to come back from behind, and everyone's on his side because he got grifted by the, you know what I mean? And that whole thing is like, that happens quite a bit, I feel like, too, with a heckler or with a tray of drinks spilling or a technical difficulty with my instruments on, for band sakes and stuff. There's a point where the audience starts to pull for you, and I think that's a super important thing. And I wonder
psychology.
Exactly. And Oteil, I'd like to ask you both. I'd like to ask you both something. Yeah, the recovery. Rebecca Trent, this amazing woman, she owns the Creek in the Cave, which used to be in Queens and now it's in Austin. I was having a conversation with her about comedy, and I want to ask you both your thoughts about, I think this translates to all art, but the amount of years that you're doing it is kind of equivalent to your age of maturity. So like 1 year in, you're like a 1-year-old. 5 years in, you're like a 5-year-old. 20 years in, you're like a 20-year-old, like if you think about that and I'd love to know your guys' perspective, because it does kind of make sense to me, because my terrible twos were like, I was looking at everything everybody else had and I was like, I want that. Like I deserve, like that's mine, and then it's like, you kind of look back on that and you're like, yeah, you throw your tantrums and you're trying so hard to impress the older kids. And then you get to your teenage years and you're sort of like, I don't want to, things start to change and you mature.
You see the difference of that rookie that walked in trying to get his shit in.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Where now it's like, music, I appreciate like silence. I would love your guys' thought. Like, do you guys agree that that's the more artists I talk to, it's not just comedy, it's anything where you put your passion in. It could be designing websites. It could be making sculptures. It could be anything. It could be management. The more years you put in, it's kind of like equivalent to your maturity and your age.
It's just experience, man. 10,000 hours, what do they say? And, for sure.
Yeah, 10,000 hours, you're an expert in anything. I made some quick notes about this first of all, like how long does it take to be funny, right? That first comic that was probably hanging out with his friends after the club, or in their friend's basement puffing dudes, and it was always funny. Well, like that's a great way to become a comic. But what does that have to do with like the grind and the minutes, the beats, the hardware, the understanding, all of that? So like,
how do you deal with being the loneliness on the road, the hotels,
Right.
it's like that, and even having, we're not even talking about music. We're talking about how do you deal with your head and the life on the road, but you don't have no way of knowing how that's going to be till you get out there.
I mean, again, music's a little bit different. You're playing 3 hours, 2 hours, where like wrestlers and comics, they're doing 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Like, well, they're driving from Poughkeepsie to Tennessee. They got to check into the hotel. They got to go for a workout. They got to eat their lunch. They got to go to the arena 4 hours early. They got to stretch. They got to get their cardio in. They got to go over the mat. Then they do 10 minutes of a wrestling match. And then they got to come, and then they got to go drive 3 hours, then come down from that. Like, so like
come down from that. That's that's it right there. That's
where the drugs and alcohol.
That's everyone. That's everyone.
Dude,
Everyone.
I just did a week of gigs in Atlantic City, and I'm on from 9 to 9:20. Like, you could set your watch. Casinos don't fuck up because they need to turn the machines on when everyone's exiting and shit, you know? So 9 to 9:20. I left my hotel room just in time to be in the green room like 20 to 9. So then I went on at 9, and then I got off at 9:20, and then I was back in my room at 9:30. And it's just like, that's it. I'm done. But I've been building up for hours and hours and hours to like that. And now I got to come down from that. And I'm just in my room. Like, I should take my pants off because I'm going to, you know, like back into my shorts. And you know what I mean? It's just such a weird, it's no one prepares you for that. Oteil, you're right. Nobody prepares you for it,
man.
No, but that's when I have a hard day, or a day that I'm thinking about for a year from now, that I'm like, oh, I got to be at this thing to do this thing for this thing. I've built another thing about the not thinking about it. I'm also saying to myself, this day will start and this day will end. Okay.
And that, second year you as a 2-year-old would never know this day will come and this day will end. You would have you'd spend that whole year bugging the. Yes.
Because how bad could it be? We've lived already 48,000 days of our lives, right? This is just a moment that is in one of those fractionals. Can I just bring up a point? Because you said something about the recovery. I just have an all-timer that I just remembered. Really sad recovery. One of my friend's fathers passed away, and we were at the funeral, and the rabbi was doing the sermon. And he was like, please, everyone turn your phones off and respectfully. And the guy was going in hard, like Jerry Maguire. We were all in tears. He was working the room. And like and again, rabbis and priests, you know, they also have this thing that we talk about. Because I actually spoke to a bunch of rabbis who I've known over the years who always talk about how, because they can cut promos, right? These guys cut promos.
Oh yeah.
These guys take monologues. I'm like, yo, is that scripted? Is that in the
cut promos? I love it.
For real. So this guy's hooking the room. All of a sudden, a fucking cell phone goes off. Okay. And it's ringing, and everyone's like looking at their phones. Everyone's the whole 300 people, everyone's vexed. All of a sudden, the rabbi looks, and it was his phone that was ringing. Okay. Right. I'm like, okay. This is the guy who said, please make sure your phones are turned off. And it was his that had like nine rings. Okay. 9 rings in a room.
That's amazing.
And the point is that, you know, like I said, you drop the glass, or someone trips or whatever, or the heckler, the recovery did not exist. Like, everyone was like, you fucking lost me.
You lost everybody.
Yeah. I'm like, there is no recovery here.
That's brilliant.
So I had to say it.
Hey man, look, we've been doing this an hour. We didn't talk about what I really wanted to talk about, which is the whole story of how you met the Iron Sheik.
Yeah.
Let's tell people about, because I know your dad and the Sheik knew each other, right? Back in Iran. Because I find this whole thing fascinating. In America, I remember Jimmy Carter presidency. And since then, Iran, you always thought it's not modern. It's just terrorists and stuff. So I was like, wait a minute, you were Jewish in Iran? Like that's a whole story in itself, but people don't realize Iran in the 70s was just very
Beau-
kind of like here in the 70s.
It was a beautiful
You
place to
know?
live, actually. It was like people were like, let's
Yeah.
go to Iran for vacation. Like it's like people were like, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful place. It was
It looked like Mary
fashionable.
Tyler Moore, which I'm dating myself, but yeah,
But I get
like
it. I get it. That with the scarf look
you
and
know,
all vibe.
yeah, the 70s cosmopolitan,
Yeah, Chanel. Like,
So but
you know, so yeah, so interesting enough. So my mom and dad, arranged marriage, by the way. Okay. Not knowing it. My mom and my dad was one of 8 children, and he was the oldest, and grew up, and he's still alive. Grew up in athletics. He didn't go to school. He was boxing. He was playing table tennis. He grew up. It was like macho camacho, like loving just sports to the point where he was horrible in school. But the high achieving athletes in Iran, the 3 sports were table tennis, table tennis, professional, amateur wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling, boxing, and soccer. Okay. So my dad was in a little bit of a world. We're at the place where they were all doing their thing. Andre Agassi's father was with them. There's a guy named Tafti who is like basically the Michael Jordan of all sports in Iran. The Iron Sheik. So my dad and the Sheik grew up best friends, 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, always playing sports together. And so when my dad moved to North America, he didn't know anyone, but the only person he knew happened to be the most hated man on television. Okay. His only friend is a guy who's now famous on television, who is despising the Iranian flag and Americans, and is like known as a terrorist. And my dad has a whole world of stories because when he moved here, he was like in the 70s, Iranians in America, like they were like exotic, like
yeah.
Now you can see guys that look, cultured, but back then, so he actually moved first to San Francisco, believe it or not. My dad was friends with guys where he hung out with Wilt Chamberlain, literally. He's got a picture with Sinatra where they're partying together, my father. But he was almost doing it in this Borat sense, like Forrest Gumpy, not knowing, not even appreciating it. I have a story that I'll say. I had to do with Jackie Mason, but like he was out in this world by himself.
Oh, I love Jackie Mason.
Iranian, not knowing anything, and so they were in touch a couple of times, and then they just, that was it. Like they were both married, they're both figuring out their lives and this and that, and then all of a sudden, when we were 4 years old, and our babysitter put us in front of the TV while she was like folding the laundry and like doing things, we would just, my brother and I would be like glued to the TV watching the Thriller video or watching, Smurfs or whatever. Wrestling would come on, and there's a man speaking on television in Farsi, screaming at the TV, and all I remember was my mom was cooking in the kitchen, and I remember her drop the pot. I heard like a crash, and then she runs in screaming like, "What is this? Who is this?" And then she looks and she's like, "That's your dad's friend. That's your dad's best friend." And we're like 4 years old. Like, what the hell do I know? I know nothing about. I can't even look back and realize what they were even talking about. My dad comes home. My mom tells my dad. My dad calls the Sheik that night. I think he must have left them a message or something. They spoke a couple days later. And back then, so like common, like they do Madison Square Garden once a month or once every 2 weeks. This was not like the 1 year now. Like it's a wider route, right? Am I good here?
Yeah.
Am I good?
Yeah.
So it's a wider route. So within a month or so, the wrestling was coming to Toronto, and my dad invites the Sheik, and we pick him up from the airport. Imagine you're 4 years old. You're picking up a guy that you just saw on television up at the airport.
Yeah.
Like you're like, and he's like a superhero, right? Like this is now becoming normal, right? And my mom spent the week cooking. My mom is an insane, if you're ever in Toronto, my mom is an insane Iranian Persian cook. Rice, and the kebabs, like nasty food coma level. Okay.
Got to go. Got to come do that.
She murders, she crushes. And we were like these Iranian kids. Like we were like not cool. Like my mom literally would make us lunch where literally the whole hallway of our school would smell of like raccoon or whatever she was making.
Raccoon.
Okay. Where like the other kids had like fruit roll-ups and like Twinkies, and we're like, please, mom. She's like, no, you're gonna have prunes for dessert. Okay.
Hilarious.
Okay. Like, I'm not joking when I say this. Like, there were times where like she made like an egg sandwich that had grape juice spilled all over it. I swear to God, it was a stink bomb. And it was like embarrassing for us to be Iranian when we were younger. People calling us terrorists, people making fun of us. And we were like our parents had lots of money in Iran. They moved here and lost everything. So we were like these $7 Velcro shoe kids. Surrounded by others that had shit. And so the fruit roll-up was like massive to me. Like a freshly squeezed orange juice, I still consider a luxury in my life, right? When I can order one at a restaurant. So all of a sudden, my mom would invite all of these people, her friends, the people on our street, come over for dinner. And Nikolai Volkov and fucking the Iron Sheik would come to our house.
Nikolai.
Okay? Like,
who needs acid?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That, like, what's normal to me, remember we talked about this, what's normal to you,
right?
Mind-blowing to me. What's normal to me is mind. So sitting on their lap, like all of it. And so, and I don't know, I could probably name you 15 times that this was happening. And every time it was like a different wrestler would pick him up, Jim the Anvil Neidhart or Don the Rock Morocco, and we would walk in to the building. Now the Sheik didn't know backstage versus friends. There were times where we would literally park the car in the lot where all the fans were, and we'd walk in where the tickets were being ripped in.
He didn't know.
And I'm 6 years old, and people are fucking cursing us, okay? People are throwing shit. And I'll never forget I said this at the funeral. I'm like, he said to me, don't worry, I'll protect you. And I remember him grabbing my hand tight, I felt great. But then there were times where he brought me backstage, and like King Kong Bundy would be like, get out of my way. And like, we would this is real, right? This is like Macho Man and like sitting on Hogan's lap and Andre and hugging him. And there was a show, and I was trying to find, I went into a fucking rabbit hole. I'm actually so upset because I'm going to sound like a liar when I say this. We were at a show at Maple Leaf Gardens. It was a show where the Junkyard Dog introduced for the first time ever the Honky Tonk Man.
Oh, wow.
As a good guy. And he said, all the kids come into the ring. And I rode on Junkyard Dog's back. I'll never forget, he was fucking drenched with sweat. And like, that was like the shit that I would be doing. And like, so what happened was, I used to be obsessed with the autographs. I'd be like, we'd have like this diary book where we got like Gorilla Monsoon and Tito Santana and this guy and that guy. And I would come back to school, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. I'd be like, yeah, we're friends with those wrestlers. They came over last night. They're like, what the fuck are you? Liar. Like, what are you even talking about?
With the stinky sandwiches.
Old $7 Velcro feet.
Like, they would tie you to a tree and call you a terrorist. Like, it was like,
oh my God.
For real. We were like these nobodies. And but the dopamine was zapped, right? You had that moment.
The sugar. Yeah,
that zap. Yeah. Where like the electricity at 5 years old, 6 years old. So I started taking pictures to prove my stories. And I've always been a big picture guy. Yeah. As much as the autograph was important and it felt like it had a more value, this and that, I was like, I need to, like, I have too many scenarios where like I'm behind the curtain, just like you guys probably do as well, in which they probably sound like lies if you spoke to the chiropractor about it. I don't mean to diss the chiropractor. If anyone's watching, we love chiropractors. I'm just saying,
That's 2 digs on the chiropractor page. Come on now.
You really taking shots at him.
One more.
I'm saying, like, you know, it's like what he sees, what we're exposed to.
Someone has a good back out of the 3 of us, Oteil, huh?
What we're exposed to. So the Sheik would come, we would be fucking cool. I would bring pictures to school. We'd bring the dolls. I did my grade 3 speech, I was dressed up like them for Halloween, like all of it. All of it. We were fucking wrestling.
We need
was like,
pics of that. You as the Sheik. Oh, Halloween.
I gotta find it. But then all of a sudden, and I think it was 1988 or 89, he got busted for marijuana, and I'm like not knowing what that was.
Yeah.
And cocaine.
Yeah.
With Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who was the good guy, and he was the back. They were in the car together. Okay.
They weren't supposed to be riding together, although maybe by that time it might have been cool.
No, dude, it was like it was the extra layer.
Not cool
sure, yet. No, for sure. But still, like the curtain was fully ripped off, and it's funny because the Sheik, who I have about 3 or 4 of those scenarios, and that was one of the main ones. Like he won the title, all those things, but this one really was the seed of seeds to change the future of the business about the real versus the fake and the embracing of the
that's true
of the storyline culture. Again, it was only 7, 8 years, 9 years later that the Attitude Era came, where it was like fully blown out. But anyways, this was the place. So when he got fired, my mom is a purist, like the most pure human being. She's like, we're never seeing him again. He's the worst person in the world. He did marijuana?
Oh
no. Like my mom is like intense. So that was like 11, 12, 13. But by 14, 15, like wrestling was like Doink the Clown, and like it wasn't like we were thinking about other things. But yeah, we were thinking about other things. And when you think about that, when you stopped, a lot of people did. The ratings went down, the audiences were shrunk.
Yeah.
There was a time, if you look back in the history of wrestling, 95, I was 13, 14. They could have gone out of business. They were doing like high school gyms for a minute, like literally. Anyways, at that time, we were struggling. Our parents got evicted from their house. We moved into an apartment. My brother and I were like troublemakers. We were like just we had no choice but to like survive and hustle. And we actually started throwing parties. This is where the kind of the inkling to our and the seed to our business was. We started throwing parties, and they were always, we called it Suck It Productions, and at the bottom it said no extra. Okay,
love it.
We use this wrestling stuff, and we put on flyers, and we'd be like, it was like wrestling was coming back. We're at a bus stop, not far from our house. And there's a poster flyer in the bus shelter. It said the Iron Sheik versus Abdullah the Butcher in a place that was 23 minutes away from us. We're like, why is this not in the Sky Dome? What do you mean it's in this place? Not knowing that there was a world that we were not exposed to, because all we knew was what was on television.
Right.
So we were like, Iron Sheik, like, we're like, do you think he'll remember me? Like that was like that was the thing. Like imagine when you're 16, 17 and you don't see someone for 5 years. Like if I don't speak to you both for 5 years, we'll remember this conversation, right?
Yes.
Like 5 years when you're 12 to 16, 17, like that's like, I think he remembers us. We go to this place.
You look totally different.
Well, but still, like, of course he's my dad's best friend. Like, what am I thinking? Right?
Yeah.
Of course he remembers us. But when I was in it, I was petrified. We go to the show. And there's 110 people in this room for the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher. You couldn't, it was in a bar in Scarborough, Ontario. You couldn't even go on the top rope because your head would hit the ceiling. It was like the second rope was like high enough. That's how low and dingy and, buy 1 pound of wings, get 1 free, $10.
Yeah.
All of that. And my brother and I are like, how is there not 60,000 people here right now? We're like, how is this possible that this is actually. And we were fascinated by it to the point where, and I'll tell you about the Sheik part at the end, but we were like, who's that wrestler? This person? What's this thing? Where did that ring come from? So we go over to the curtain and we're like, we'd like to see the Sheik for a minute. We were his family. And he sees us and he starts fucking bawling. Like he's like hug and kiss and like way more. And I'm sure you might see this, both of you might. It was way more as the performer embracing us than we were fanning out. And I'm sure like as talent, sometimes like you're looking for a real connection sometimes then versus like liking me for what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right. Liking me because I'm that talent, liking me because I'm a gig guy, liking me because I am funny. No, this was like it superseded that feeling, right?
Yeah.
It was like, it's just back to where we were when we were what we were, right?
Right.
And so exchange numbers get it. But while we were at the show watching these things, and we were throwing parties at the time, getting 300, 400, 500, 600 people coming to these parties that my brother and I were working at, that promoting. And we were, for 16 years old, like we were making money that saved our parents our whole thing. Like we threw a party that we made like $7,000 in one night. Like it was like, holy shit. Anyhow, so we're like, how is it possible there's only 110 people here to see the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher wrestle when we get like 600 people watching us, right? Like we're like, I bet you we can get people coming to watch me versus you wrestle. I tell this to my brother. So we asked the lady with the ring. We asked this guy. We end up getting all these pieces together. And we wanted to put on our own wrestling show. So we spoke to this lady, Elma and Mac. They were like these wrestling carnies that owned the ring. We spoke to this wrestler and the referee, and we just quickly tried to figure it out. And we said, let's fucking put on a show where me and my brother wrestle at a local community center, and we'll see what happens. That was so this show was in. So about 4 months later, the WWE was in Hamilton, Ontario for a show for a pay-per-view. Okay. And now wrestling's fucking hot. Like Austin, Taker, Bret Hart, Mike. It's like Rock, NWO. Like it's popping. So we're like, it's cool now to talk about wrestling. And we go to the show. It's sold out. And I've got 50 of these stories, but this is the one. We sneak into the show. We don't have tickets. We couldn't afford tickets. Like we just drove there and we found a way to. And I've snuck into more shows than anyone you know. Like I've once used to know how to get into the Sky Dome, so I would get people to come. We would sell peanuts outside of the Sky Dome to go to and then I'd bring Elton John, Billy Joel, Plant and Page, Aerosmith. I'd bring parents with me. I would charge people to get them into the building. Okay. So we see these two kids that recognize us from bar mitzvahs and being bar mitzvah DJs. And they're like, oh my God, you're the Magen boys. We're like, yeah. They're like, the mother's like, I can't go into the show. Can I just give them to you and you can babysit them while we're in the show and I'll pay you? So we don't even have tickets. And we end up sneaking these kids in. Okay. Okay. We're now sitting at the top of a ramp watching it because we don't know where to sit. And this has happened twice before, and I'll show you pictures to prove it. But this one was the first time this ever happened. Security guard goes, "You come with me." We're like, we're going to jail. We're fucked. And the guy goes, "You see that match? After this match, we may need you guys." We're like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "We need people to sit in those first few rows because the seats are going to be empty." Ringside.
Sweet.
No, we just snuck in. I have a story that's 50,000 times bigger than this. That's basically parallel to. We ended up talking to this guy. His name was Matt Miller. Matt Miller was the former head of security for the Cleveland Cavaliers in the 90s. He moved to WWE and touring. We started talking Iron Sheik, this, that, and he was like fascinated that we were like connected. I'm like, we really want to put on a show. But like, you know, all these guys like King Kong Bundy and Kamala and blah, blah, blah. They're like, well, why would you use those guys? Oh, so sorry. We're standing at the top of the ramp and he goes, "I'll do this for you guys. If you guys do this for me, I'll get you guys a couple of autographs after the show," is what he says to me. Okay. And we'll maybe meet some of the wrestlers. This was the trade-off to sit front row and be a seat filler, was autographs and pictures. Okay. Think about how fucked up that is. Okay. So we end up not sitting front row, but we end up spending the whole night sitting at the top of the ramp of the aisle with the guy and learning tree it, asking him questions and this and that. And he goes, He goes, well, why would you ever want those old guys when you can get the new guys? We're like, what do you mean you can get the new guys? He's like, well, if you're on the right time and right day, there's guys that we could probably get you like those guys that are in the ring right now. It was the Christian and Edge were part of the Brood. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, well, you're doing something nice for me, and maybe I can set you guys up. That night, we at the end, the last match was Undertaker, Kane, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. He takes us backstage. Okay, I've got pictures of in which I don't know if you've been to a wrestling backstage area, but all the boys were watching the match on a monitor, right? I don't know if you've ever been in an environment like that where all the talent's watching what's happening in the ring, and it's every wrestler. It's Jeff Jarrett, it's The Rock, it's Mick Foley, it's every wrestler of that. Look at the No Way Out roster. That's what it was called. It's every wrestler there. Like, imagine you're 17. Like, this is acid. Okay, this is a perfect.
Yeah.
But here's where I'm still, part of me is like, is it real? Is it fake? What is it? Do they like each other? Do they hate each other? Like, you still don't know.
Right.
Like, it was still a don't know moment. And it's mind-boggling. So the end of the match was Taker and Kane were both beating the shit out of Austin, and they both like kind of laid on each other, and they both pinned Austin at the same time. So we didn't know who the winner was. And Vince McMahon was at the curtain, gets into down the ramp, and takes the belt and walks back towards the curtain. And we're watching this on the monitor. Okay, I didn't see Vince at the curtain because the curtain wasn't where we were. But then I realized the curtain was just right here. And Vince gets in. So now the curtain opens. I see where the curtain is. Vince gets into the limousine. And now the ramp, which is 10 feet away from us, opens, and Vince drives away while these guys are chasing the car. And we're all watching it in real life and on television at the same time. Like, fucking head explosion. Okay?
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, they're like, he drives off, and we're off the air, cut. They start hugging. He pulls out. Vince's like, and that's how you do it, boys. And this and this and that. And I'm like, whoa. The guy, we ended up befriending the guy, and we ended up getting us our first indie show where we had Edge and Test. Okay.
Wow.
Yes. So we paid them $1,500 Canadian each to book them. And we went through the WWE's American. Jim Cornette was actually the one who ended up helping us. He was the head of talent at the time. And I was a fanboy for that. I was a fanboy for every conversation, a fanboy. So King Page versus Giant and Edge versus Test. We sneak into the show. Okay, we don't have tickets. And we also snuck in 20,000 flyers, okay, papered flyers, in which we would go from the 500 level all the way to the floor. We would say, here's 100 flyers. I'm like, take one and pass it on. And we would do it all around the building. We papered the shit out of this building, okay? And the tickets went on sale the next day on Ticketmaster. And again, total rookie mistake. We're doing Ticketmaster. And the night of the show is another thing. But all of a sudden, Ticketmaster, the next day, tickets go on sale. We sold like 70 tickets. And then they took it off because someone at WWF said, this show is not happening. This is not a legal show. This is false advertisement. The president of WWF Canada, Carl DeMarco, we went over Canada's head and spoke. That's where the disconnect was. And so we ended up getting in a huge pile of shit with WWF Canada because we had this arrangement with them. Anyhow, so in our Magen Boy traditional way, we were starting to figure out how to promote the show, where we would start going to other schools and we'd start driving around neighborhoods where there were kids. And so we're like, oh, look, these kids are playing hockey on their driveway. So I would walk up and start talking to these kids. I'm like, do you guys like wrestling? Do you like this? Do you like that? And then my brother, who was with me, drives and tries to run me over, gets out of the car, and we start fighting each other. And like literally these parents were like ready to call the police. And then as soon as they were done, we started giving out these flyers. Come to our show, April 30th. Da, 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 da. We did that for like 3 months. And at the time, an average indie show was around 200 to 300 people. The one with the Sheik was 120 people. We went. Our friend of mine, Ofer, who had a very successful lawn mowing business, fronted us the money to put on the show. It was about a $15,000 overhead. Getting like certain lights, we got like the crazy laser show, and instead of having like regular barricades, we got these steel metal barricades. Instead of security guards, we hired police officers at like $90 an hour, not knowing anything. Anyways, the night of the show, where they were expecting 200-300 people, we had about 1,400 people come to this wrestling show. Okay. My brother and I literally were the second main event. We had like 7 matches. Edge and Tess was the main event, but everyone came for us. Okay. And my mom still thought it was real when we were fighting each other, that during the match, she tried getting into the ring to stop us from fighting. Okay, hold on. Yes. And the security guard, the police officers thought it was part of the show. Okay,
so they didn't stop her.
No, she's like, please stop. And we actually reenacted this like 5 years ago at a show that we did with my mom, part of the show. And so,
and she's in on it this time.
Yes, so the whole thing was like, you talk about like electric. We ended up losing like $5,000 on this show, and everyone's miserable. Everyone's crying. Literally, the guy who lent us the money was crying, and so was the guy who lost $2,000 on the food, because we just didn't know what we were doing. My brother and I were also crying. This was in the post-huddle conversation. We were bawling, but we were bawling of happiness. It was like, this is the greatest night of my life. We pulled off this fucking thing. So then we do another show. So we lost $5,000 the first show. Then the next show, we lost $3,000. Then we do another show. We lost $1,000. And then by that time, I'm in college, and I became friends with the guys from the student council. And they're like, yeah, you do all those wrestling shows. We should do one at the school. I'm like, okay, well, where should we do it? They're like, we'll do it in the pub. I'm like, well, how many people does the pub fit? They're like, I don't know, 200-300. I'm like, well, how much are we going to charge tickets? They're like, I don't know, like $3, $5. I'm like, but the show's going to cost you $10,000. We don't care. I'm like, well, $3 times 300 people, that's $900. So what I found out was that in university average, your tuition is $2,000 a year. Well, 40 of those dollars times 80,000 people goes towards student activity. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So they put on these shows where it didn't matter if someone came or not. They had to deploy the dollars. So then he introduced me to the guy who ran all the Canadian college and universities in Canada, an organization. And we brought Jim the Anvil Neidhart and King Kong Bundy to a trade show, and we sold 40 wrestling shows at 19 years old across Canada for real dollars. And that's where we learned.
Yeah.
And since that show till now, we've never lost money on a show again. We only do produced, sold shows. No, I'm not worrying if one person comes or 1,000.
And that's exactly like the music business, because, so many of these music promoters, they started out booking bands in college. Or the Allman Brothers manager, he said, I brought the Allman Brothers to American University when I was in college for peanuts.
Right.
It's like it didn't even cost a lot. Great bands. Like, we'd just be like, oh my God, are you serious? But that's how they started getting their.
Well, you got to start somewhere, right? Like, and now you're not worrying if 1 million people come to a show. You got to guarantee. I'm assuming that's how it works. But like,
yes, I do. Yeah, for sure.
So that's where I think people don't want to be in the maybe business, right? When you're a comic, when you're a musician, or you're in wrestling, like, you're working the maybe until you're working the no. It's a guarantee.
Yeah.
Right.
And Edge is, for people that don't know right now, is wrestling, is WWE superstar right now. And his wife, Beth Phoenix, she's back. Glamazon.
So
it's crazy to think about like
where they started.
how, yeah, it's great.
There's like about 100 wrestlers that I've worked with that were $50 or $100 guys, which was generous, by the way, to them at the time, because they would work for free and work that are now, on any of the rosters.
Yeah.
And so that's where the journey of a wrestler, who they were then, who they are now, is I'm a huge currency guy. I found this as I was cleaning up. Actually, this was actually very cool. This is a National Wrestling Alliance membership roster. I found it was actually where it has every promoter's phone number, address, booking.
Whoa.
Yeah, like here's one. Look, Vince McMahon. It says Capital Wrestling. Where does it say Capital? Capital Wrestling. It says Vince McMahon. It says a phone number. It's like this is a pamphlet. Like I'm a huge collector.
Now Billy Corgan.
Yeah, of
he
course.
bought NWA, and they just did a thing here in Boca, because we have like a wrestling. It's called BRCW, Boca Raton Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, so they work with them?
All my local stuff, and they just did a show with NWA, and I went to it with my friend Magen. It was really great, man. Yeah, that's so cool to see that. There's so many, man. I gotta come to your house because I want to look through all that stuff.
Well, we could have like a garage sale one day. We're gonna be like I'll do like a whatnot. Like, all right, today I've got this, and like let's talk about the backstory of that. Like, it's interesting as I'm hearing us, because I was actually going to bring up a point to you and with Mike about the fandom part about this. Like, are you aware of the things in your ecosystem that maybe a fan would be like, holy shit, that you're like, oh, it's no big deal to me. Like, I wrote the word US Blues, even though I don't think that's the song. Like, you know how like a fan would be like, oh, the second set of that show, this is the first time they did this thing that was so important to that thing. Or like, if you're on Star Trek, episode 16 of season 8 was when this girl told Spock something, and it was like, we're like, do you think Spock remembered that? Or it was just like, it was just another day. Like, I remember speaking to, like, when I was a super like green fan, even though I was in the business, like I'd say to a wrestler, like, you remember that night on Monday Night Raw when you beat that guy small, like, I don't remember fucking yesterday. Like, have that like knowledge about the stuff that you do, like, where like you were at this show that was so historic, but you didn't even realize it because it was just another gig to you.
Totally. It's like the Chris Farley, when you somebody Chris Farley's you. It's like, man, remember when you did I was like, man, that was gig number 9,040. But there's some cats, like, it blows my mind, especially with the guys that I work with. Like, it could be the guys or Allman Brothers guys. The amount of drugs that was being done. And like Greg Allman would like remember like details, except for Watkins Glen. They were like, nobody remembers that.
No one. Well, that's the thing. I hear people all the time. They're like,
too much drugs.
I was in Poughkeepsie that night when that was the night that this happened. It's like, do you really remember that, or are you just saying that? Right?
But like again, this is the part where you like get a little jaded when it's your.
You're talking about you
for a career. Yeah, me. But and when I went to that Earth, Wind, and Fire concert, because I had never seen Earth, Wind, and Fire when I was little.
Was that with
my
Lionel?
First time seeing it.
With Lionel? Not with Lionel.
It was with Santana.
I was at that. I love that. I was at the Toronto one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went, and Verdine White is one of my very first. It's like Bootsy, Verdine. Yeah. Like,
he's so cool.
1 and 2.
That guy's like, he's so cool.
Still crushing it in his 70s, jumping all around, But here I finally got to see them at 58 or 57, however I was. And it's amazing. Just all the songs from my childhood, I was just in tears the whole time. And so when I left there, I was like, this is how people feel when you play Oteil. You got to remember to look at it from their side and not be so jaded. It's just night number 29, and now it really helped me going to that concert to just bring it all back for me.
That reset sometimes, like it's like that validation
Yeah.
for the reminder of it's someone else's
Yeah.
Super Bowl night, not yours. You're just playing in it or whatever,
And people write me things like they'll DM me on Instagram. It's something that really heavy happened that I didn't know about, and it connected, or maybe there was a synchronicity with the moment that I was a part of it. And I was like, see, aren't you glad you were just giving it your all then? Because that was something so meaningful to them that you couldn't. And it's like, that's why I really appreciate about wrestlers. I feel like because they take so many bumps for it and go through so much physical pain to entertain people, that they're less jaded. And I appreciate that, because when I was with Nigel and Kavi at SmackDown, and Liv Morgan put Shayna Baszler through a table, that was the first for me, Kavi, and Nigel to see a live table shot.
Right.
And when Ricochet was doing all this crazy cool stuff, my son was losing his mind. He was like, dude, Ricochet. It was like Ricochet was a real life superhero.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is the best, man. I just appreciate the fair dust of it. It's so
it's so nice that you can buy in, right? You can buy into
Yeah.
that feeling you're talking about.
Absolutely, man. I think it took my kids for me to look at wrestling through the eyes of a child, and the comedic aspect of it, like Sami Zayn always trying to crack people up and make them break character, So it was like, I love it.
Total synergies, dude.
But
there's as I'm hearing what Mike is talking about, like there is not an this is like talking about comedy, talking about wrestling, talking about music, like those are like that's the triangle. That's the equal. Yeah. I have my heart pounds for all those three things.
Me too. Oh man, thank you so much for coming on. This is great. I've had such a great time. And,
there's like stories, dude. There's like we got to kind of freaking go pound for pound on some shit. I don't even know.
Oh, absolutely. I want to try to have you back when I know stuff is coming up, like WrestleMania 40 in Philly, which I'm going to be at. So we'll do a little lead up to that and maybe make it coincide.
Whatever, however, whenever, whatever is what I would say to you. I'm grateful.
Well, bless you. And thank you for hooking us up with the Pantheon guys, because we wouldn't even be on Pantheon if it wasn't for you. So thank you for that too.
Those guys are great guys. You're a beautiful human. I'm grateful for our friendship, and just thank you for letting me just vent here. Like we're just letting it out.
We're just going, man. All right, Bubba, you have a good one today. Yep. Love you much.
Love you too. For sure.